Hi, I'm John with the Carousel Digital Signage team, and in this video, I'd like to talk about how to deploy Carousel Cloud onto BrightSign devices using BSN.Cloud. So in this video, we're going to talk about 4 different things. We're first going to go over a few concepts to make sure that we understand all the moving pieces. Then we're going to get into an actual walkthrough of a real deployment looking at the software involved. Then we'll talk about some of the different management and monitoring options that you have with BSN.Cloud. And finally, we'll look at how to update the Carousel Cloud application on your devices. So let's get started. So let's first talk about a few concepts. Number 1, BSN.Cloud. Why are we talking about BSN.Cloud? Well, back in the day, it actually used to be fairly difficult to manage deployments, large or small scale, of BrightSign devices. And fortunately, BrightSign has been working on this. They've seen that as an issue, and they've come to the rescue with a really great solution in BSN.Cloud. They've introduced this to make deployments so much easier. And we're really excited about this because it significantly streamlines deployments, and it gets us to our shrink wrap to signage concept on the BrightSign platform. So what exactly is BSN.Cloud? Well, it's a management platform that they've built that connects your player devices to their cloud. And this gives you streamlined deployment of settings, applications, and provides some real-time monitoring and control of your devices. So BSN.Cloud is composed of 2 different pieces. The first is called Control Cloud. This is a free subscription that's included with every player that's running BrightSign OS 8.0 and higher. Control Cloud gives you a really streamlined player setup to allow you to provision either one player or multiple players really easily. It also gives you remote access to those players so you can monitor and control them from your desktop. And it also gives us some really simplified deployment of signage applications like Carousel Cloud. The second piece of BSN.Cloud is called the Content Cloud. The Content Cloud gives you some very advanced content management and large-scale network management features. It's really fantastic. But for Carousel Cloud, we use the free Control Cloud for our deployment needs. Content Cloud is not required at all to use Carousel Cloud. So in the rest of this video, we're going to work with Control Cloud exclusively. The next concept to talk about is a network inside of BSN.Cloud. So to use BSN.Cloud at all, first, you need a user account, either for yourself or for your team members. Once you have your user account set up, you'll also create a network. And every time you log in to BSN.Cloud, you'll select which network you want to work in. Within your network, you're going to register a set of your BrightSign devices that you own using the serial number of those devices. Registering your device into your network will assign it exclusively to that particular network, so it can't be used by other networks or accounts. Now, inside of your network is also where you're going to create a library of device setups for your devices. A device setup is essentially a configuration or like a group of settings that you want to apply to your devices. Now, later on, we're actually going to go and assign each device in our network a particular device setup. Now, it's worth noting that each device and device setup is assigned exclusively to a single network. However, your user account can belong to multiple networks. In the example we have here, we've got some users that have access to our corporate production account, or our network, and some users who have access to a test network of devices, where perhaps they want to stage out some changes to their hardware or setups before actually rolling it out to production. Another really great example of this is if you happen to be an installer. In that case, you can actually have access to your customer networks during their initial rollout to help them get started and troubleshoot any issues that they may have. And then you can hand over the reins to that network to the customer so they're off to the races. Later on, they can actually re-grant you access to their network if for some reason they might need your help later on in the future as well. All right, the next concept we want to talk about is devices and setups. So, first thing is a device setup. As I mentioned earlier, a device setup is essentially a configuration. It's a set of settings that you want to apply to a device. And a setup is really composed of two different parts. The first part of a setup is the settings you want to apply to a device, like your network settings, maybe what time server you want to use. If you have a proxy server involved on your network, you set all that stuff up there. There's also several advanced settings about debugging and logging that you can apply inside one of these setups. The second half of a setup is about the application that you want your player to run. So the combination of these two pieces, the actual settings and then the application itself, combined is called a device setup. And you can have many device setups on your network as part of your device setup library. So in this case, we have 3 different device setups in our library. We've got one that's configured to use DHCP networking and launch the Carousel Cloud application. We have another setup here that's configured to use wireless networking and deploy the same Carousel Cloud application. And then finally, maybe we have a setup here for a DHCP networking to run a custom application that maybe you've built. The other half of this equation is the devices themselves. So in this case, maybe in my network, I've got an XD234 with a particular serial number that I want to have in my front lobby. Now, of course, in your signage network, you can have multiple devices assigned to your network, and this will be part of device provisioning. So in this case, I've got 4 different players of various types, and I've named them such that, to the various places that I want to have them in our building. So within a network, just to recap, you've got your library of device setups and a whole list of devices that you want to provision with those setups. And your goal next is to assign a specific device setup to the appropriate devices. In this case here, most of our devices on our network we want to run on DHCP and deploy the Carousel application. So in this case, we're going to take that one setup and apply it to 3 different devices. Now, if you have a network of hundreds of devices, you can apply that same setup to 100 devices all at the same time. Now that I have that setup applied to my devices in the network, the moment I boot up those devices, they're going to register themselves to my network using the serial number. They will then start provisioning themselves using the device setup that I've configured for them. Now in our case, our devices here will be configured and automatically they will launch the Carousel Player application once provisioning has completed. In the next part of the video here, we're actually going to do a walkthrough of a real deployment so you can see all the concepts that we just talked about put to use in real life. Now that we've gone over some of the concepts in play, let's actually do a walkthrough of a real deployment of Carousel Cloud using BSN.Cloud. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually log in using my user account to one of the networks I've created. I'm not going to go through all the steps to actually show you how to create a user account and set up your initial network. That's a pretty well-traveled path. For the moment, I'm just going to log into my existing account. So I'll head over to control.bsn.cloud. I'll see the login screen, and I will enter my user credentials. When I sign in, it's going to immediately ask me which network I want to work on. Now remember earlier we talked about how every user can belong to multiple different networks, and here's how I pick which network I want to work on right now. So at the moment, I've got a Carousel HQ network, which is how we're driving all the signs in our office. That's pre-selected for me. I'm just going to go ahead and hit next to start working in that network. Now I'm signed into my network, and up at the top right corner you can see which network I've selected, and I can switch to different networks at any time. Now that I'm logged into my BSN.Cloud account, the next thing I'd like to do is to create a device setup. And in this setup, I want to configure some basic networking settings and configure that setup to install the Carousel Cloud application. So let's do it. The first thing I'll do is head into the admin section of BSN.Cloud, and I will click Device Setup. This is the screen to set up a brand new device setup. And I'll do this very quickly for this example video, but here is where I would set certain networking properties, like picking a different time server, setting wireless authentication, those sorts of things. At our network here at Carousel HQ, we have a very basic DHCP wired network, so actually I'm fine with all the defaults for the settings. The one thing I do want to change here is which application gets deployed when the device gets provisioned. What I'm going to do for Carousel Cloud is select Custom Application URL. And in this field, I need to paste in the URL to my Carousel Cloud application. Where do I find that URL? It's inside of Carousel Cloud, the user interface itself. So here I've logged into my Carousel Cloud account. I'm going to head over to Configure, to the Players section. And down here, there's a Players Setup. And you can see the BrightSign tile over here. I'll click on that tile. And now I see instructions on how to configure my player. So what I'll do is I'll copy this URL right here. This is the URL that I will use for my account to tell BSN.Cloud how to download the Carousel Cloud application. So I will copy that URL. I'll head back to my BSN.Cloud account and paste that URL right here. When I'm happy with this, I'll give this setup a name, like Carousel Cloud Deployment. And I will click Add Setup File to Library. At this point, my setup has been saved to my setup library. You can see I've got a few others here that I've configured before, and I'm ready to start provisioning some of my devices. Now that I've created my setup, telling BrightSign how to actually deploy my Carousel Cloud application, the next thing I need to do is to add one of my BrightSign devices to my network. And I'll do that using the serial number of my device. So what I'll do is I'll head into the device provisioning part of BSN.Cloud. And here there's a button to add device. And this is as simple as clicking Add Device. I'll paste in the serial number that I have for my BrightSign device right here, and I'll click Add Device. The device has now been added to my account in my device provisioning list. Now, if I had lots of devices to provision, adding the individual serial number every single time might get pretty tedious. This is where BSN.Cloud has fortunately added a feature to upload a CSV file full of serial numbers so you can provision devices in a batch. To do that, there's a button here called Upload Provisioning File, and there's also a button here called Download Template. What I would recommend is to click Download Template to get a sample CSV file. You can then open that CSV file in something like Excel and follow the pattern that they have in the example file to add all the serial numbers of your devices. Once you've created that CSV file, you can click Upload Provisioning File, select the CSV file, and you're off to the races. With my device connected to my BSN.Cloud account, the next thing I need to do is instruct this device about what setup file to actually apply to it. So if you remember, when I created my setup file, I called it Carousel Cloud Deployment. And when I added this device to my list, it automatically selected a setup file called Default Setup. That's not the setup file I want to use. I want to use the one that I made. So what I'll do is I'll click the device here. This button up here is a toggle button, so you'd want to make sure you select Apply Setup, and then click Apply Setup. At this point, you'll see a list of all of the device setups that you have on your network. And in my case, I'm going to pick the Carousel Cloud Deployment, the one I made a few moments ago. I'll click Apply Setup. At this point, you can see that for my device with the serial number I entered, the setup file selected is now my Carousel Cloud Deployment file. And I'm ready to boot my device. Okay, now that I have my device set up all ready to go, my device is registered with my BSN.Cloud network, I'm ready to boot it up. So what's going to happen is that when this thing boots up, it's going to connect to BSN Cloud, and my network will be listening for this particular device to check in. And it'll recognize it by its serial number, and it'll automatically match it up with the device setup that I've already created. And at the end of this, we'll hopefully see our Carousel Cloud registration screen ready to go. Moment of truth. Here we go. The device is powered on. And at this point, it's going to be doing a few different reboots to try to connect, pull down the information it needs, and be ready to go. So at this point, we'll wait for a little bit and we'll check in again once this device has connected to my network. And just like that, we're ready to go. In this time, the BrightSign unit has connected to my BSN Cloud network. It's pulled down my setup file that I created, and it's installed the Carousel Cloud application. This process took about somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes, depending on which model device you're using, but I didn't have to do anything after plugging it in other than wait. So at this point, I'm ready to start registering my player with Carousel. So now I'm ready to register with Carousel. All I need to do is to go to the URL here on the screen and enter in the code that's being displayed. This step is important to make sure that this player connects to your Carousel Cloud account and not anyone else's. So what I'll do is I'll head to the URL and I'll enter in the code that's on the screen and I'll submit the code. Carousel tells me that the code has been accepted and the player has been registered. At this point, if I head to my player dashboard, I should see it in my dashboard, and I should start seeing Carousel content displayed in any moment. There we go. I now have a player that's connected to Carousel Cloud, connected to BSN Cloud, and I'm ready to go. Now that we've got Carousel up and running, let's take a look at some of the features that BSN Cloud offers for device monitoring and management. The first thing that we'll take a look at is viewing logs. So if I need to troubleshoot my device in the field and I need to maybe see some log files about what's going on, BSN Cloud, the Control Cloud, makes that very easy to do from your desktop. So let's take a look at how that works. There's a tab up here at the top called Network. I'm going to click the Network tab, and this is going to show me a list of all of the devices that I have connected to my network. And you can see this is the one that I provisioned just moments ago. To gain access to that particular device, I click the gear icon on the right-hand side. What this is going to do is actually, from BSN Cloud, connect directly to that device and start pulling information from it. So in this case, I want to see some logs. So I'll head over to the Log tab. And at this point, I can see all of the log files for the application that's running on the player at the moment. This is a great way to get some diagnostic and troubleshooting information remotely without having to physically touch the device. The next thing we want to take a look at is confidence monitoring using snapshots. Now, occasionally you may not be present to see the output of the device. In that case, you would really like to get some confidence about what it's actually showing. BSN Cloud has a great feature called taking snapshots that shows you the live output of that device. So to do that, head back to your Network tab and you'll go into the device using that little gear icon. And on one of these tabs, you'll see something called Snapshots. And there's just a nice big button right there that says New Snapshot. Click that button and BSN Cloud will go instruct the device to take a snapshot of its output and return it to you right here. So I can click on this now and see this happens to be a video that I'm playing in my rotation. So now I have some confidence that, yep, my video is actually coming out the HDMI output of that device. The next thing I'd like to try is a remote reboot of the device. This is technology. Sometimes things goes wrong, and one of the best things that we can do is to try rebooting. But since you may have these deployed throughout your facility, what you don't want to do is have to go out and get a ladder to go and press the reset button on that device. Fortunately, Control Cloud from BSN Cloud gives you the ability to reboot that device remotely from your desktop computer. Like all of the other monitoring features we have here, I head back into that gear icon. And there's a tab called Control. I can head into that Control tab, and I've got a lot of different options here. But in this case, right up front, there's a reboot. I can just click that button. It's going to ask me if I'm sure I want to reboot the player. I hit OK, and the player will reboot. And since this player is connected to my BSN Cloud network, and it's set up with my Carousel Cloud application, I know that when this reboots, it's going to launch Carousel Cloud again. Another maintenance task that you might need to do occasionally is update the OS that's running on this device. Software companies like Carousel, like BrightSign, we introduce new features, we fix bugs all the time, in those cases you may need to update the software. BrightSign fortunately has made it very easy to update the OS of these devices, and again, you can do this remotely without having to get a ladder. So to do this, I'll head back to my network tab and click the gear icon of my devices, and there's a tab here called Advanced. So for a particular device, I'll go into that Advanced tab, and then down here you can see there's a BrightSign OS update section. And I've got a lot of different options for the different versions of the OS that I may want to apply. Typically, I'll probably want to keep it on that production OS at all times. So in this case, I do have an update to my OS available. I'm currently running .119. 127 is available. If I wanted to apply that update, I could click that button and hit update. So now that we have Carousel deployed to our devices, probably one of the next logical questions is, how do I update the Carousel app on that device? It's a great question. Let's talk about it. So at Carousel here, we do lots of updates to our software. We're constantly working on things. We're constantly making the software better. In fact, a lot of times we're deploying updates to our software at least once a month, if not more frequently, to make sure that you've got the latest and greatest features and fixes at all times. So we wanted to make it very easy for you to update the application software on these devices. So let's take a look at how that actually works. First off, how do I even know that there is an update available for my devices? Well, here on the player dashboard screen directly inside of Carousel, you can see that right at the top there, it's telling me that there's an update available to version, it looks like 0.10 on this test machine. And then I can see my two players that I have connected, they're currently running on version 0.9, so they're out of date. So I have the opportunity to update them to the newest version of the BrightSign app. There's a couple of ways I can do this. I've got the convenience right here of clicking a button for Update All Players. I click that button, hit Update, and all my players will start updating. I could also do it on an individual or grouped basis. So let's say I don't want to just deploy an update to my entire fleet all at once. Maybe I want to deploy an update to one of my players or two of my players to make sure that everything goes smoothly. I can do that too. I can just pick one player, and up here in the Actions menu, I can say Update Players, and then I can just do a targeted update to that one player. But if I'm happy with the rollout, whenever is most convenient, I can select on my players and click Update All Players. And you can do this on your time frame, whenever is most convenient for you. When you click this button, the players will reboot, and they will download the new application from the Carousel Cloud instance, and you're running with the latest software. So that about wraps it up for this tutorial video of using Carousel Cloud and BSN.Cloud to deploy your signage networks from shrink wrap to signage. We hope you can see how excited we are about this combination. It's really powerful. So thank you very much for watching.